Bad news.
Bad news for the state.
Bad news for capital.
Bad news for patriarchy.
Bad news for all forms of domination.
Bad news. Angry voices from around the world.
Our monthly info show from anarchist and anti-authoritarian radio projects worldwide.
If these news are bad, I don't want to be good. This is a new show from our common international network of anarchist and anti-authoritarian radio projects.
On the 15th of every month, you'll be able to find on our website a-radio-network.org the latest issue of Bad News.
Wait, not so fast. Let's start from the beginning. What is bad news?
You know, things are really bad right now, everywhere.
So this will be quite a depressing show.
Not necessarily. The more resistance there is, the more there are projects that aim for a future without domination, without coercion, the more we will be having good news, which are bad news for the state.
So we need more bad news to have good news.
That's right.
So what news can we expect? Where do these news come from?
The good thing about having an international network is the wide range of topics we will be able to cover. But what news exactly? It's actually the decision of every project participating in the network what they like to share with the world.
I noticed this show seems to be in English. What the fuck?
That's sad, but true. Let's leave it at that.
Come on. At least we could say that there are actually people interested in offering the same show also in other languages, for example, Spanish.
We will be seeing a lot of experimentation going on over the months, as each monthly program is actually put together by a different project of the network.
So we don't know how the bad news will develop. Maybe they get even worse.
Before they get better. In any case, have fun, go out on the streets and make some noise, maybe with our little show.
On the second episode of Bad News, you will be hearing news from these following projects. Radio Zones of Subversive Expression 93.8 FM, 105 FM, The Final Straw, Rosas Negras, Dissident Island, and Radio Kuruf. Without disregarding the everyday struggles as well as every form or act of resistance against the existing status quo, being in a state of alertness, due to the repressive threats that have been launched against our radio station, we deliberately chose to broadcast our recent statement as a piece of counter-information.
Update on the repression against radio zones of subversive expression, Athens 93.8 FM.
On Monday, the 10th of July, we received information from multiple trustworthy sources that the authorities have launched a repressive operation in order to forcefully stop the transmission of the radio zones of subversive expression at 93.FM. This was the result of a complaint that was lodged by the municipal radio of Iraklio, Epikinonia 94 FM, to the Telecommunications Authority for alleged interference, even in areas where we never covered. After that, the Telecommunications Authority can raid our premises, aided by the public prosecutor and the police.
This event is directly connected with the interference that the radio zones of subversive expression have been suffering by the radio station Dirla FM, which transmits at the same frequency where the radio zones have transmitted since many years. Dirla FM is an opportunist pirate radio station that operates over various FM frequencies and airs radio quiz scams promoting premium rate phone numbers. The phone calls and the revenues are managed by the telephone company Alphatel SA, which is licensed by the Telecommunications Authority and whose ownership coincides with that of Dirla FM. This particular pirate radio station broadcasts with a transmitter which is much more powerful than ours from the mountain of Egaleo, whose position is far more superior as compared to our broadcasting point. Dozens of complaints have been made against this radio station, and it has been noticed that the broadcast is interrupted shortly before the special van of the Telecommunications Authority visits the place in order to measure the transmissions.
Meanwhile, at the same time that the prosecution against our radio station began, the Power Regulation Authority raided the location, the broadcasting center of Dirla FM, because of theft of electricity. We note that this was not the usual process by the Telecommunication Authority for illegal broadcasting, as threatened in our case, but this way, by tackling only the theft of electricity, Dirla's transmitter and antenna remained intact, and they are ready to transmit again at the frequency of 93.8 FM after they get rid of us. We therefore believe that there is a huge issue of concealment of this pirate fraudster by the Telecommunications Authority itself, as opposed to the attempt to silence the radio zones of subversive expression after a single complaint.
From where we stand, the actual responsibles are the officials who co-sign the above actions, namely the mayor of Neo Iraklion, Nikos Babalos, and the president of EETT, and simultaneously Professor of DUA, Faculty of Engineering, Dimitrios Tsamakis. With their signature, they put on mute the freedom of expression of a venture which since many years gives voice to social groups, workers, and all the struggling and resisting parts of the competitive movement.
This action follows a multifaceted enterprise of defamation and suppression of militant venues and projects of struggle nationwide, and especially the targeting of anarchist space by political actors, Mitsotakis, Boutaris, Kaminis. By the means of TV and radio broadcasts and mainstream press articles, they systematically targeted and suppressed university occupations, social spaces, political squads, and militants. At the same time, the Minister of Education proposes to set up a committee for the university asylum, allegedly for delinquency in the universities, with the participation of, amongst others, the Ministry of Justice and the Undersecretary of the Ministry of Citizen Protection, proving that the whole discuss about the restoration of the university asylum is a malicious joke.
The suppression attempt of the radio zones of Subversive Expression radio show has been pursuing a series of attempts of putting on mute various auto-organized radio operation projects throughout Greece over the past few years. Among these are the seizure of our own transmitter of the School of Finance's University Squad in 2012, the seizure of Thessaloniki's Radio Revolt equipment in Delta Squad also in 2012, the evacuation of Radio Katalypsi along with the Patras Parartima Squad in 2013, the forceful removal of the antenna of the 105 FM radio station of Mytilene in 2014, and that of the Free Social Radio of Thessaloniki 1431 in November of the same year, as well as the recent eviction of Radio Psalidi in Rethymno, Crete, among other collectives.
Repression mechanisms believe that they will take advantage of the summer period in order to be able to achieve their plans more easily. They are mistaken. The seasons of indolence have gone away irrevocably. The operation of our radio station will be uninterrupted and non-negotiable. We will not leave our frequency at the mercy of anyone. We will stubbornly continue to diffuse the voices of the struggling people on air.
Against the enforcement of slavery in our lives, keep fighting on air.
You're listening to 105 FM.
The independent, self-organized radio station of Mytilene at Lesbos Island.
It's the melody of rage that unites us. Bad News 105 FM, June 2017. Hello comrades, this is a broadcast of counter-information of the self-organized independent radio station of Mytilene, Lesvos Island, 105 FM. We will inform you about local news from Lesvos that occurred during the month of June. We will start with the incident of the denouncement of an Aegean University student's rape in the student's residence by a security guard. On the 19th of June, a university student of the University of Aegean who lives in the student's residence in Mytilene denounced her rape inside the residence by a security guard who is responsible for the resident's safety. After the denouncement, we made some solidarity actions. Firstly, some individuals posted 2 banners about the topic in the university. After the Assembly Against Rape Culture was established on Friday 23rd of June, an intervention on the court was made due to his planned apology, where leaflets were thrown, slogans were shouted, and a banner was made as a first reply to him, who has also made sexist comments and actions against other students on the residence. On the same day that night, a night protest was achieved in the center of Mytilene, which obviously bothered the Syro staff and frequenters of known entertainment shops located on the waterfront of the city, where these people supported the rapist security guard with phrases such as "the boy is innocent" and other similar phrases. Furthermore, they posted on social media photos and videos targeting comrades by writing threats against them and against people who are in solidarity with the university student and to anyone who receives sexism attacks. The culmination of the mobilizations was the occupation of the management building of the Aegean University. Through the occupation, a great deal of pressure was exerted on the Aegean University, and the result was an extraordinary meeting of the Senate on 29th of June, attended by all the occupants. The outcome of the meeting was the satisfaction of 2 of the 3 requests, which are also confirmed by the written announcement of the senator. These requests were: first, immediate removal of the rapist security guard from any university area. Second, immediate and enforceable support and solidarity by the University Institute and participation in games against the rape culture. And although the third request wasn't fulfilled due to legal frameworks and the policy line that the state vertically and explicitly indicates to each university institution, this third request was immediate termination of the contract and any cooperation between the security company and the university and the company that is burdened with the cover-up of various sexual harassment charges which have been reported to the responsible individual of the dormitories. In addition, the alleged rapist no longer be included on the company's payroll. So, the occupation came to an end on the 29th of June by the struggle against the rape culture, and until the third request will also be satisfied, is still to go on. The largest number of immigrant arrivals compared to those of the rest of the months of 2017 had Lesvos in June. Specifically, 940 people arrived on the island. On the contrary, the number of arrivals in Chios was greatly reduced. At the same time, 9,636 immigrants are trapped in the Aegean Islands, while at the beginning of the year there were 6,453 deportations, a policy that keeps existing in the European fortress.
This is William from The Final Straw Radio, and here is a brief radio essay on the Inauguration Day protests in the U.S. and supporting the over 200 people who were arrested that day. On January 20th, 2017, eyes were glued to Washington, D.C. in the United States, when arguably the most openly fascist president that many of us had seen in our lifetime was sworn into office. This elderly man-child, whose political strategies seemed to involve shock tactics and gaslighting, a term used to describe the process of deliberately making people believe themselves to be insane via highly mixed messaging and manipulation, has emboldened much of the white supremacist, anti-feminist, and homophobic, transphobic currents that exist here. Whether or not Donald Trump believes himself to be the savior of the U.S. who will, quote, make America great again, unquote, is beside the point. What is true is that his role in the U.S. domestic politics has had a disastrous impact not only on the political, via criminalizing dissent, making institutional and grassroots attempts at battling climate change all but impossible, and attacking modes of access to healthcare for all, but especially women, people of color, and LGBT people, but also the personal. White supremacist attacks, rallies, and recruitment campaigns are occurring more frequently nowadays, and dangerous bigoted currents of many terrible and obnoxious types are finding more of a foothold in all avenues of life. This is what people took to the streets on that day to oppose, by any means necessary. Inauguration Day began as misty and overcast, but the Black Bloc had no trouble lighting police pride flags on fire as it convened in a public park. As the numbers swelled to over 500 people, the bloc took to the streets immediately and went hard fast, diverging and converging in patterns that momentarily baffled the cops. After 40 minutes of this resistance, during which many windows lost their existence and police deployed tear gas and flash grenades, 230 people got kettled, which is a tactic by which some police form a loose blockade that tightens slowly around an area, while other police try and drive protesters toward that area. This occurred at the corner of L and 12th Street near downtown in Washington, D.C. As you might imagine, this mass arrest was a huge blow to the morale of anarchists, anti-authoritarians, and their comrades, but no one let that stop the massive resistance which occurred for the rest of the day into the night. People battled the cops and Trump supporters. You could see piles of charred and burning red baseball hats, which is a signature Trump supporter item of clothing, and Confederate flags all over the city. And the by now famous twin images of a burning luxury limo spray-painted with the phrase, "We the People," and a blocked-up person punching white nationalist Richard Spencer in the face on live TV are the most iconic images of the day. These occurred against a general backdrop of mass disruption that spread citywide. You may be wondering, if you aren't already aware, about the over 200 people who were mass arrested on January 20th. The city of Washington, D.C. is the capital of the United States, and as such is the literal seat of establishment, power, and everything we as anarchists here are fighting to destroy. The most conservative prosecutors have come out of the woodwork in this case, and are similarly emboldened, like their more grassroots counterparts mentioned before, to make decisions based solely on suppressing dissent. There are currently 214 defendants who have all been charged under the federal riot statute, which means that they could each be charged with a fluctuating number of felonies, which carry maximum sentences of 70 to 80 years in prison. Considering this statute makes it legal to charge over 200 people for, say, all breaking the same window or collectively hitting the same cop, it creates an even more twisted situation than it would be normally. However, the majority of the defendants are banding together to collectively battle these charges, refusing to accept any deals that may harm their co-defendants, to not collaborate with law enforcement in any way, and to hold as true that the actions of the D.C. police were neither justified nor necessary. It's always good to keep in mind also that these kinds of arrests and subsequent charges are frequently used by the state as a way to quell dissent, and that collective defense and solidarity are both very useful tools for combating this strategy, as well as the clear markers of fascism which are becoming more noticeable day by day. Indeed, these markers are so noticeable that this defense has gained some hefty support from both legal teams and in the media. Mainstream media was initially slow to report on this in a supportive way, not very surprising, but through very directed and sustained outreach, it is starting to come around to a more supportive stance. The American Civil Liberties Union, a humongous nonprofit legal organization, is in the process of suing the D.C. cops, the city itself, and the police chief for being complicit in what essentially amounts to use of excessive force, the sexual assault of several people while they were in custody, and the denial of food, water, and bathrooms while in custody. Even though this lawsuit is filed on behalf of 4 individuals out of 200, many similar activists and legal workers have filed similar suits and made parallel allegations on behalf of the J20 defendants, including a class action lawsuit by some defendants pertaining to the use of chemical weapons by police. We find this interesting to mention, not because of any misplaced faith in the legal system, but to demonstrate how visible the level of blatant cop misconduct got on that day. It is important to see this resistance in context with those arrested at Standing Rock. Over 800 people are still under grand jury scrutiny. Also with those arrested doing border solidarity work, those still facing charges and repression for the Ferguson uprising in 2015, and most recently, the 23 anti-fascists arrested in Charlottesville, Virginia, fighting a KKK rally this past Saturday, plus all the others arrested in autonomous actions all around, battling the rise of white supremacy and fascism. I'd like to end this by plugging the support of Dane Powell, who is the first of the J20 defendants to have been sentenced and may perhaps be the first political prisoner of the Trump administration. He is a parent and water protector, an all-around great human being, and the 4 months he'll be inside will be 4 months too long. You can visit defendj20resistance.org to find his address to write letters, or go to generosity.com and search his name, Dane Powell, Powell, to donate to his commissary fund. There is also a week of solidarity for this case starting on July 20th, the 6-month anniversary of the block, and ending on July 27th, the day when a motion to drop all the charges will be presented. You can send report backs, questions, and any and all accounts of solidarity to j20solidarity@protonmail.com. Thanks for listening. Again, I'm William from the Final Straw Radio in the so-called United States, and this has been Some Bad News.
Last year, around the 45th anniversary of the uprising of prisoners at the Attica State Prison in New York, prisoners across the so-called United States of America engaged in national days of strike. The strikes, whether in the form of refusal to leave one's cell, a riot, or a work stoppage, rolled through many facilities across the nation. Around September 9th, 2016, prisoners engaged as they could against the diverse and horrible conditions they faced where they were and flexed their individual and collective muscles in a way never seen before in the USA. Around the world, prisoners and those outside of the walls showed solidarity with the prisoners' strike call-out. Thankfully, the registered descent of the September 9th prison strike did not have the same bloody outcome as Attica, in which dozens of prisoners and their hostages were mowed down by National Guard machine guns. The slave labor system, which is enshrined in the U.S. Constitution by the 13th Amendment clause ending slavery except for in the case of punishment for a crime, has transferred forced servitude of individual slaveholders to that of the government, which simply rents out the labor of prisoners to the capitalists who are in its favor. With the official end of slavery in 1865, the white supremacist system of American capitalism simply criminalized, marginalized populations and selectively enforced its edicts to create new, but mainly the same, slave classes. Outside of the walls, the deputized, mostly white working-class slave patrols graduated into the police forces of today. Cops will stop, frisk, and check one for their passes if their skin color tells the cop that one might be a non-subject to the state, aka an undocumented immigrant, or in one stage or another of the carceral system, as 1/4 of the total black population of the United States is. The police, as has been shown again and again, have an aptly named carte blanche to kill and imprison poor bodies of every skin shade with impunity. For August 19th of 2017, there has been a call by some prisoners and some solidarity organizations to express resistance to the U.S. carceral state. The significance of the date is in its relation to the attempted escape by imprisoned Black Panther Party organizers and revolutionaries George and Jonathan Jackson in 1971. These attempted escapes and subsequent state murders at the Marin County Courthouse in California and nearby San Quentin Prison lit the spark to the fuse of the Attica prisoner uprising. These events sit intrinsically connected in the mind of many seeking black liberation and an end to imperialist white supremacy on Turtle Island and abroad. This year, August 19th, is seen as an attempt to collectively remember this struggle in the trajectory of wider struggles against the racist capitalist state, and to see ourselves in that lineage. It is an opportunity to raise hell about the public secret that in the United States, slavery is alive and well, and that we can bear it no more. A march under the banner of Millions for Prisoners' Human Rights is now being called for in the belly of the beast, Washington, D.C., in support of prisoner dignity and against modern slavery. And other events are being planned around the United States and the world. A good place to start when seeking more information on this is imweubuntu.org. For a recent and thoughtful attempt to address a call for a new abolitionist movement for a revolution against white supremacist capitalism in the USA, directed at anarchists, check out the text, Burn Down the American Plantation by the Revolutionary Abolitionist Movement. This text can be found for free at revolutionaryabolition.org.
The situation of trans women in El Salvador has not changed much in several years. The community is still being discriminated, suffer acts of violence and persecution to the point of being killed. 70 murders of trans women have been committed from January to March 2017, according to a report by the Procuraduría para la Defensa de los Derechos Humanos and the Programa de las Naciones Unidas para el Desarrollo. 52.5% of trans women have received threat of death or violence, and 48.8% have suffered attacks on life and physical integrity. As a result of this problem, 16 LGBTI organizations have decided to form a common front to fight for their rights and face the violence they suffer. Among their objectives, they seek to ensure that the Salvadoran state respects and promotes their rights, that international treaties and the Constitution are complied with, that access to security and the right to identity be priorities on the agenda of political parties. The activists denounce the lack of support by the Procuraduría para la Defensa de los Derechos Humanos and the government of the Frente Farabundo Martí para la Liberación Nacional, which they describe it as far conservatives in this matter. In order to defend their rights, it is important that people organize themselves, but also must focus not only on law reforms, but also on structural changes that modify institutions such as church, state, school, and family.
Welcome to the second edition of Bad News, courtesy of Dissident Island. On our June 16th show, we began by discussing the UK government's hostile environments policy.
And this was a policy that was implemented by Theresa May back in
2012.
Mm-hmm.
The hostile environment is really about making it uncomfortable, or hostile as it says, for what she termed illegal migrants. Beyond like the discourse on like what is legal and illegal and so on, it's just that there's lots of new categories being added to what is illegal, and most of the time what is considered to be illegal is actually not being able to prove your status. And the way the hostile environment works is that you have to show your passport for everything, for every sort of basic services that you need to access, whether it's the hospital, census in schools, bank accounts, driving license, and now also homelessness.
And the policy is being implemented actually not just by government or by the police force or in those ways, but it's actually citizens are being asked to implement it against each other.
So yeah, we're seeing that they're forcing and fostering like climate of collaboration, so through either criminalisation or fines. So for example, if landlords don't run immigration checks, they'll get fined, but they've also now criminalised that. So yeah, basically through decentralising border checks into like the fabric of everyday life and doing it in a way where you don't feel like you're directly leading to that person's deportation. I think like this has basically turned millions of public service workers, people in neighbourhoods, basically into immigration enforcement officers. And some of these people knowingly, some of these people maybe a bit more unknowingly, but at the end of the day, this has definitely created an environment in which you have to be extremely wary of your neighbour, who could turn out either to be a snitch or the person checking your passport for a driving licence or etc. So it's...
The other sort of parallel process to that is the automation of collaboration as well. So a lot of this process also happen now through digital means. We saw that with the NHS and the Department of Education, where all the data collected by your teacher or your doctor or your GP is actually being shared without the knowledge of the people taking the data. So there's one process that was just being described now, which is actually everyone policing each other, and another one which is this sort of machinic nightmare of collaboration.
VTC.
Clear.
Inertial loading.
Clear.
Plasma.
Steady.
Sweeps.
Extended.
Levels.
Clear.
Primary drive.
Clear.
Secondary drive.
Clear.
Meteoroid shield.
Clear.
Main drive activated. All main drive computers locked. All systems are free thrust condition green. 5 seconds from now. 4, 3, 2, 1.
The tragedy of the Grenfell fire has been in the minds of many in London recently. Here are some reflections on the disaster.
Here, I actually wanted to get somebody from the Radical Housing Network on to talk to us, but obviously they're otherwise occupied at the minute. So I just wanted to play audio from a video that they put up today, which is Pilgrim Tucker from the Grenfell Action Group talking about the history and a little bit of context.
Residents were scared of the tenant management organisation. They felt that if they spoke out against what was happening, their tenancies could be affected. And that was based on real history. They'd tried so many times to get so many problems with the flats looked at and never had a positive response. Those who were brave enough to speak out were picked out and called troublemakers, and nasty rumours spread around about them in order to try and discredit the really valid concerns that the whole community had. So the main concerns here were, over a long period of time, about very basic maintenance and safety standards. Things like the water sprinklers working, things like the alarm systems working, the lighting. There had been power surges in the flats where the lights had gone down, and not only did the lights go down, but the emergency lighting didn't work. And the emergency lighting wasn't addressed, and nor were the power surges looked at. There were fire safety reports done years ago now, this is, and they were just ignored, and still months later tenants were asking the TMO to act on these fire safety instructions that they'd been given, and it never happened.
So last week we had Peter Gelderloos in the studio. He's probably best known for his book, How Non-Violence Protects the State. He is currently touring social centres around Europe with his new book published earlier this year called Worshipping Power, An Anarchist View of Early State Formation. We caught up with him while he was in town.
So Peter, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot for having me.
I guess my first question is, why would we learn about state formation? Like, what value does it have to understand the development of states over time?
Learning about where states came from, how they emerged, why they evolved and developed, actually shows us quite a lot about how they function today. It puts certain things in perspective. Things that may seem to be advances or forms of progress can be more easily revealed as changes that the state goes through in order to increase its power. And well, actually one of the things that I was even surprised by in the research of this book is how many of the mechanisms that very early states use are still in use, albeit in another form, by modern states.
In the book, you recognise a few different definitions of the state that exist already, and also a few different theories of state formation.
Instead of using a single definition, I thought it would be better to hold two definitions in tension. One is an anarchist definition, which is primarily ethical, antagonistic. It defines our relation to the state as an antagonistic one, chooses sides. And the other definition is structurally more precise. It's more an anthropological one that lists various criteria that a form of hierarchical social organization needs in order to qualify as a state. And so by using both of those, we can avail ourselves of more precision in understanding changes in hierarchical social organization and also understand our relationship to those structures. As far as the different theories, there's a lot of theories, the main ones that are taught in school really, that just have no factual backing, that are totally out the window as far as states evolving because we needed them or because they were beneficial or resulted from a social contract. All of that's total nonsense, of course. There are other theories that are more prevalent in the left or in the anarchist movement, which might include material determinism, environmental determinism, primitivism, each of which tend to name certain factors that cause states to form. And I think all of those fail to explain many cases or many pathways of state formation. They also tend towards a mechanistic view of human societies when, in fact, a number of states arose where nascent elites actually, as a political choice and as a strategy, took advantage of certain opportunities that arose that wouldn't inevitably have created states. And just the same way, a lot of stateless societies are also the result of the specific choices of people who reject being ruled.
This month also marked our 10th birthday.
Ah, greetings! Welcome to
Dissident Island Radio.
I am the Count, and guess what time it is? Yes, it's time for the number of the day. Oh, what could the number of the day be? Well, let's find out, shall we? Are you ready? Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Oh, I wonder what it is. 4, 5, 6. The suspense is killing me. 7, 8. Maybe it's the next one. 9. Not yet. 10. Ha-ha! That's it! The number 10! Ha-ha! 10. I'm a 10. Oh! Finally, the tension is broken! Just kidding.
That's okay. I'm 10. I'm a 10.
Sagen Sie jetzt mal bitte
Anarchie.
Anarchie.
Anarchia.
Ob geschichtlich oder brandaktuell,
Mit Berichten und Interviews, mit Beiträgen und Collagen
beleuchtet das anarchistische Radio Berlin das Phänomen des Anarchismus.
Viva la anarquía!
The weather these days in and around Berlin in July 2017. The big show is over. As we finish our contribution for this bad news episode, this Monday the 10th, we do not have all impressions from the powerful Against G20 weekend collected yet. Not all advantages and harms for emancipatory movements and anarchist issues are analyzed yet. But before we ask our friend that was in the crowd for the Anarchist Radio Berlin, we want to give you a short insight about an incident before, which had some analogies to what happened in the streets of Hamburg at night. Where the cops show up, the video cameras turn on, but work done over years on solidarity and culture might, with good luck, find a place in the footnotes of page 27. But of course, documentation is good. You can see there what the campaign of the German police called Auch Mensch taught us. That cops are humans too. Thank you for that information, but we already knew that you are not just robots of the government. Some of you don't like us and need somebody to hit, so with helmets on and weapons in your hand, I'm sure that it is a lot of fun. Long live humanity. Okay, I already talked too long. Listen to the voices from Friedel54.
Last month we told you about the squatted social center Friedel54 in Berlin. On June 29, this project was finally evicted.
Cops have started to drag people out of the blockade. This eviction is a violent one. They use pepper spray. Cops are nearly at the entrance.
The eviction of this blockade was only the first part in an 8-hour-long eviction process that started at 4:30 in the morning and was marked by an excess of police violence against protesters and the press.
Die Solidarität im Kiez ist riesig.
Solidarity in the neighborhood is amazing. At all times, people come by and show their solidarity. Whether old or young, they leave a note, put up a candle, write a poem, put flowers down, or simply talk to people. The empty space now is filled with solidarity and also with resistance.
Das Loch, was da jetzt reingerissen wird, das wird gefüllt mit Solidarität und auch mit Widerstand.
Activists and supporters are not planning on forgetting about the Friedel.
Die Friedel gehört in die Friedel.
The Friedel belongs in the Friedel. That's how it was and how it will be. Everything else is to be seen.
Aber aufgeben kommt nicht in Frage, weil dann das wird.
But giving up is not an option, because this would mean to surrender the neighborhood and the city to the investors and its accompanying politicians.
Spitzenpolitik zu überlassen.
So, now we have our correspondent here. You just arrived from Hamburg. What are your impressions just before you go to bed and get some of the missing sleep from the last days? What do you take home with you?
I think in the end, people showed that they are really angry and that they are willing to fight back and that they know what solidarity looks like, despite of how the media might want to portray everything that happened, despite of the media ignoring the fact that police officers were kicking people in the head on the ground, punching people, pointing at people with machine guns, provoking crowds, provoking demonstrations that had been set up legally. Despite all of this, people showed that they will not be intimidated, that they will not be provoked, and that they're ready to fight back. And not only people that came to demonstrate, but also the people from the city of Hamburg, the neighbors. I saw many people offering their houses, offering water, offering bathrooms to demonstrators, offering safe space for them to calm down after confrontations with the police. I think that, that people are ready to show that they're angry and they're ready to fight, and that they will not let the media or the politicians or officials dictate how they can resist and how they can fight back.
But the sound bites you and a comrade from Australia collected show that, as expected, the government and the police try to shut down the activist infrastructure.
Meanwhile, we have heard that buses from Scandinavia are being held up by the police at the border in Flensburg and will not make it in time to the demo. For instance, yesterday at the airport, the police impeded people coming from Bologna to enter the country. They said, "You have the wrong look. You have clothes typical of the scene."
The tactic of sending a message of fear to the city and hostility to demonstrators was practiced already weeks before the summit. It was used to confuse especially the camp organizers.
My impression is that it all fits together. Telling there would be no camp and telling the people that there would be more or less war in Hamburg was to make those people afraid who were not yet sure to come, and to tell those people who were already sure to come that it would get dangerous for them or they would probably get hurt. Building up this mass prison, Geza, was surely part of this try to send out the message that this would be war.
The crew tried to handle that in a dynamic way and started also to focus on decentralization.
Because we were kind of afraid of exactly this situation, we decided to put up other camp places, not because we thought that we could offer enough sleeping places for all the people coming, but to send out this signal that there is a place to put up a tent which is not immediately attacked. So that's why we decided to put up other spaces where we could have like small camps.
On Thursday, people began to gather for the Welcome to Hell demo. And despite heavy police presence and a general militarization of the city, the spirits and energy were high in anticipation of the demo. However, as rumors had it, the police began provoking the crowd and attempted to prevent the demo from moving as planned.
The demo has started 50 minutes ago. That is, it has gone to the street. As it is still standing there, we have here 4 water cannons, 2 riot tanks and several hundred cops that stood there in a way that the demo should never have gone through there. This was planned.
Soon enough, the police began pepper spraying, pushing and attacking demonstrators, creating a general state of chaos, anger and confusion.
Dass die Leute hier sauer sind, hat guten Grund. Unzählige Genossinnen wurden verletzt. Die Polizei hat die heutige Welcome to Hell-Demonstration, die ein kraftvolles Zeichen setzen wollte, angegriffen, verletzt und zersprengt.
However, the crowd would not be pushed by the cops.
Antikapitalista! Antikapitalista!
As the Welcome to Hell demo pushed forward, at the end of the night, the cops attacked the crowds again and continued on the strategy of aggression, violence and provocation. As usual, the media was always focused on so-called violence coming from people wanting to talk only about property damage and street fights. There were many great actions before and during the shake hands and try to smile party of some zombies, like a big strike at the Hamburg harbor and masses of striking students and apprentices, blockades and many more, but along that line we want to mention the FCMC Media Center, which was housed in the Mellontor Stadium of FC St. Pauli. On the webpage fcmc.tv and on their YouTube channel you can find good pictures, videos and sounds. They held 6 press conferences where anti-G20 activists had the chance to talk about their actions and analysis about what is going. We picked out little pieces from the press conference on Friday the 7th. A lawyer of Rote Flora said about Thursday night,
I think politically it's a bad idea to attack the neighbors' cars. But I can absolutely understand the anger of the people after what had happened before. We need freedom of expression, we need freedom of assembly, we don't need a police state. As we are concerned and outraged, we are also impressed. We are deeply moved by the courage and the determination of the activists that in and despite this situation come together, that don't give up their rights and at this very moment are on the streets, showing that the streets belong to the people, not the G20 summit.
In spite of the violence perpetrated by the police, everyone showed what solidarity can look like in and around the streets. Intimidation will not work and people will fight back.
I think one of the places that at least touched me most were squatters that squatted a church some weeks ago that invited us to come there. They said they could not offer a camp, but they could offer sleeping places, and that was really great because it was completely obvious that offering us to sleep there makes it more difficult for them to be in the negotiations with the house owners, in this case the church, to maybe legalize this squat. And so we were really thankful to be offered this place, and we're still there.
So, having hurried around in the streets, which forms of solidarity affected you?
I think it was also very important and very crucial that there were so many things organized as far as infrastructure, which is another form of solidarity. For example, that collectives were organizing to provide food. The fact that the St. Pauli Stadium offered the stadium for an alternative media center so that activists and freelancers could connect with each other, share material, and report on what was happening on the streets. That the stadium offered showers, that the stadium offered a place to sleep to people after the police attacked the camps. All of this was really crucial and was just another form of solidarity, and without all the people that were working behind these projects, I don't think that it would have been possible the way that it happened.
Wow, now it is raining and the sun is shining at the same time. Through the branch of a tree I can see a rainbow, you see it? It's really romantic. I hope that all the persons that got injured physically or mentally during the protests against G20 can marvel at it too. We send you our best wishes to let you have the energy, love and solidarity for a good recovery. So far from the Anarchist Radio Berlin. You can find us on aradio.blogsport.de with a monthly news review in German, interviews, recordings from information events and other stuff, sometimes also in English or Spanish language.
Hello, comrade. We are the Angry Voices from Radio Kuruf, and these are the Chilean bad news.
The Chilean state occupation in the Mapuche territory doesn't stop its torture, kidnapping, and murders. We start this report sadly, because the Mapuche people once again have said goodbye to 2 warriors fallen in territorial recuperation process. We are talking about Luis Marileo and Patricio González, murdered in cold blood by the ex-police captain Ignacio Gallegos Pereira. The ex-policeman now became the owner of many lands in Fundo El Encino, in Los Sauces town. In this place, he shot down the two young men while they were exercising their legitimate territorial control in the pieces of land their community is disputing. The two Mapuche men were there the last 10th of June searching for two horses they lost because the people who work in the lands of the ex-policeman gave notice that the animals were seen in his stable. We also want to report the complicity of the mass media because they sentenced Luis Marileo and Patricio González as criminals before any investigation. They only support the version of the police and the ex-captain of this institution. In the middle of this tension, product of the murders, the day after the funeral of the two young men, the militarized police from Malleco, another place inside Mapuche territory, broke into the autonomous community of Temucuicui, poisoning with tear gas the children of the rural school. This action has been repudiated by all Walmapu and a lot of Chilean organizations. Institutions like the Teachers Union, International Amnesty, and the National Institute of Human Rights have expressed and condemned once again the terrorist violence that the Chilean state exercised over the Mapuche childhood.
By the angry voices from Radio Curuf, these were the bad news from Walmapu, lands under control of the Chilean state.
You've been listening to Bad News, Angry Voices from Around the World. You can find this audio on our website a-radio-network.org, along with links and descriptions of all the radio projects involved. Feel free to share
on your own websites
and use this show as you see fit
on your own radios.
Thank you for listening and see you next month
on the 15th
for a new edition of Bad News.
Bad news.
Bad news for the state.
Bad news for capital.
Bad news for patriarchy.
Bad news for all forms of domination.
Bad news. Angry voices from around the world.
Our monthly info show from anarchist and anti-authoritarian radio projects worldwide.
If these news are bad, I don't want to be good.